NRCS services, and also I believe another producer in here who's watching who has accessed NRCS services. So please feel free to like bring your knowledge to this.
I'll give it a minute and see if we can connect. Is that me or Margie? We lost her altogether. I'm sure she'll try to pop back on. There she is.
All right, we're back at it. Thanks for bearing with me. I don't know why everything kicked out. But what I was saying was we do have folks in this room that have accessed these services, as well as having the actual expert, Mr. John Boatman, with us here. So anyone who wants to bring their knowledge or expertise to this, that's awesome. We'd love to hear from you, especially if you have specific tips and tricks. I'll be kind of specifically calling on both Chris Gang and John Boatman to share their expertise and experiences throughout this. So, you know, there should be a time for y'all to hold some of that stuff and bring it into the room, but anyone can drop any questions into the chat as we go. So I'm going to do a quick screen share. Great.
And just for everybody who is joining us today, there should have been in the announcement just now, but I am recording this again for perpetuity. So you'll have access to it later, and it'll be, we plan on uploading it to YouTube so that you can share it with other producers that might find it useful.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Margie Green, and Angelina, actually, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and kind of kick off the series?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like the thing to do. My name is Angelina Harrison. I'm the Director of Markets for Market Umbrella. We run the Crescent City Farmers Markets and a home delivery sort of aggregated CSA through Partners Top Box Foods. We also have a variety of nutrition incentive programs for shoppers using SNAP or new moms on WIC. In the past, those have extended to folks at risk of diet-related health problems, just all kinds of interventions on both the supply food system side and on the New Orleans food consumer side. And so this series of technical assistance or training classes that we're offering today in conjunction with our great partners, Margie and Sprout, is intended to support those ends. I also wanted to mention here, in case I forget, we are currently planning a spring training series as well, primarily focused on agricultural producers. So if you find this useful, you might also find future sessions on the topics of, I'm trying to remember what they are, food safety for farmers market vendors. So for producers smaller that are either usually exempt or qualified exempt from the Food Safety Modernization Act, or for non-agricultural producers altogether. We'll be holding a training session for that. We are also working on one that is great for farmers market vendors or prospective farmers market vendors or farmers market managers, hosting Grow NYC and their some of the research and projects that they've done around consumer behavior at farmers markets. Very useful for market managers and for vendors selling in those contexts. And there's some other ones that we're still kind of getting the lineup together for, but please keep in touch with us on that. We'll share links and contact information as we get it. I'll put my email also in the chat so you can reach out to me about any of the things that I may have just mentioned, and I'll pass it on to Margie, who we're so grateful to have here today, despite all the things.
Awesome. Yeah, so grateful to be here. So I work at Sprout NOLA. We're a farmer and gardener technical assistance and training organization. That means a lot of things. That means we can actually come out and help you learn how to cover crop, one-on-one. It also means that we can help with paperwork navigation if you're going to access some of these NRCS programs. We're super lucky here in Louisiana, and on this call today, we do have our agent, John Boatman, on. And so he is definitely going to be the guy that you want to talk to if you're considering using any of these programs or signing up for any of these cost shares. And so I'm going to talk as a farmer technical assistant a little bit about getting prepared to start that and what that process might look like. And we will hear from him. So the first thing you want to be doing if you are thinking about, joining an NRCS program or participating in a cost share is you want to figure out what your conservation goals on your farm are, and then also what would they maybe be if you had cost sharing or technical assistance available to you. So really kind of having a grounding of what you would like to do to improve the environmental quality and the conservation practices on your farm, as you begin to enter a relationship with your NRCS office. So I don't like this presentation. Oh, there we go. The USDA NRCS is a federal agency that works with private landowners, so farmers, ranchers, and foresters, to put conservation practices into place that will benefit the soil, water, air, and wildlife. So the USDA has many different branches and offices, and the NRCS is the office that's going to be handling natural resource conservation. So on farm, protection of soil, water, air, and wildlife. That also means that these offices are the offices that are going to be talking to you as a farmer about climate smart agriculture and climate adaptation in the coming years as well. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is find your agent. So you have found your agent if you're in Orleans Parish today, and also I believe some other parishes. We'll let John tell us about that when he jumps on. But if you are not in the Orleans Parish region, you're going to go to your agent contact map. And these service centers will also be wonderful because they'll give you your FSA agents, your RMA agents. You can click through and let's say that you are one of the producers for CCFM that's over there in St. Tammany Parish. So you're clicking through and you actually are going to see that your NRCS Plant Materials Center, which is one of the many programs NRCS offers, that's going to be over there in Galliano. But then you also have this liaison office of your NRCS and the service center office. These are all of the contacts that you will have that would be not necessarily in the St. Tammany area. And you'll see this a lot with our map. There's overlap, or there's agents who serve multiple parishes. So you have this liaison office in Denham Springs, which is St. Tammany. Denham Springs is not St. Tammany, actually. My apologies. Franklinton is St. Tammany, but then you have, your liaison office in Baton Rouge also would have some overlap. So you can find everything that you need right there, and that's a great resource. And we'll be sending this out to anyone who wants to use this presentation. So you can just follow up with me via email if you'd like to get any of these links. I'm happy to drop them into a quick email. Go back into presenting mode. So after you find your agent, you're going to explore your options. Once you have some thoughts about your property and you know who your agent is, you want to call them out and begin to explore options. So one of my favorite things is that, like, with NRCS, it's a creative process, and those agents are actually bringing their technical expertise and their knowledge to this process, right? It's not a one size fits all. That's not how conservation even works on a farm. So one time I had a conversation with Mr. Boatman, and I said, what is the best way for us to get people ready to come and access your programs? And he was like, it's for us to come out there and begin that relationship. So you want to feel empowered to call those agents and have them come out to your property and walk the property, and start thinking about what are some options of ways that you can put in conservation practices on your farm. So the two kind of programs or services that I think we should focus on today in terms of NRCS offices that you might want to be getting ready for are Eqip and CSP. Eqip provides financial and technical assistance to agricultural producers to address natural resource concerns and deliver environmental benefits. So the biggest difference that I have seen between Eqip and CSP, especially from talking to growers in other states as well, is that Eqip is more of a project-based kind of individual environment. Eqip stands for environmental quality implementation practices. I actually should have brushed myself up on that acronym before we jumped on, but that Eqip programs are very project-based and they're more short-term. And so one of the most popular and adapted in the Orleans Parish area, and I would say, you know, in my history and experience in the state, is going to be the high tunnel program that Eqip has. So the other thing is that you can look through all of the conservation practices that fall under Eqip. I always add a U in my brain. And so I think I did that when writing, but I always think this is a really interesting tool, and it's a really great way to kind of inspire your imagination and jog kind of what is possible on your property, to look through what those conservation practices are that are possible through Eqip. So you can see that there is a PDF of info sheets and practice overviews for each one of these environmental practices. And speaking of that high tunnel, which we will be hearing from Chris Gang in just 1 second about, you can come on down here and you will see, here's the high tunnel system. So I haven't actually clicked through this to see what we see, but then here's your conservation practice standard overview. So you can see what's possible through this high tunnel program, which is a cost share, and we'll hear more about that in a second, but it kind of tells you a little bit about this conservation practice. And so you can see that same technique or that same PDF that's available for each one of these practices, like an herbaceous wind barrier here. That can be a really great way to keep sediment from moving around, to keep soil still, to also protect your crops from a wind barrier. And one of the things that I see a lot on flower farms is that people can even plant herbaceous wind barriers that are perennialized cuts. So there's a lot of creative and cool stuff that you can do with these NRCS programs. So now we're going to talk briefly about high tunnels. I'm going to see Chris is here. Chris, would you mind coming off of mute and letting me ask you a couple questions about the high tunnel? You're actually out at the farm. I love it.
Yeah, hi.
Thank you so much for being here. Would you do a quick intro of yourself?
Sure. I am the farm manager for Pistil and Stamen Flower Farm and Studio, which is a business that's been around for I guess 6 or 7 years, but we've only had a farm that's actually a farm for just over 2 years. You can kind of see it behind me. We have almost an acre in cultivation right now, and we grow mostly for direct sale to customers and for events like weddings that we also do all the design for. Is that a good starting point?
That's a great starting point. Yeah. So I asked you to come talk to us today because I was thinking of you all as a farm that has recently gone through the Eqip process to get a high tunnel, to get a cost share on a high tunnel. So I guess my first question was, what do you wish that you had known in preparation for doing this project? What can you impart to us?
I feel like it went relatively smoothly, and there's not a lot that I wish I had known earlier. We at the outset, I guess I didn't kind of realize just it is a bureaucratic process, and it takes longer than I was expecting for various things to come through. But part of that was about getting registered with the FSA, and you know, once we got the go ahead from NRCS, from John, it's been really easy and straightforward.
Awesome. We love to hear that. So one of the ways that I know that you have recently put in this high tunnel, other than getting to see it recently, is that I saw that you reached out for recommendations on construction and contractors on a local listserv. Can you tell us a little bit about the actual install of the high tunnel?
Yeah. So we've everything's been a little bit weird for the business since COVID happened because our main source of revenue is weddings. So instead of hiring somebody to just come in and do everything, we've tried to have me and other part-time seasonal employees do as much of the work as possible. And when we first started working on it, which was in March of this year, or April of this year, maybe, I emailed the Greater New Orleans Growers Alliance list, and a handful of people wrote to me and said that they'd be excited to help. And we weren't paying like a contractor rate, we were paying like an hourly rate that I think was decent, but not like what you would pay what you would pay like a licensed professional or whatever. And so basically, I end up being the person who directed most of the construction. We ended up hiring that person again in the fall when we were putting more of the finishing touches on it, although we still haven't put the plastic on it yet. I'm sitting actually like in front of the hoop house, and I can just show you it's still kind of without that last layer of plastic, which we'll probably put on actually in the next 2 weeks. So what that meant in terms of construction was we ordered a hoop house from a company called Farm Tech, in part because they give a discount to members of the Young Farmers Coalition. And it came with a very detailed set of PDF instructions and also printed copies. And basically I read through those in very slowly and carefully. And then the person that we hired had worked on a hoop house in another location previously. And basically I just sent him a bunch of questions and I was like, am I reading this right? Does this sound right? Is this kind of like the way that these things are usually constructed? And so then we ended up purchasing a handful of tools and renting a couple of tools. And then we just went at it, just me and him. And that's been what most of the construction labor has looked like. I would say that for anyone who wants to, let me also back up and say, we got a pretty big hoop house. It's 30 feet wide by 84 feet long. And so it was kind of more of a big construction project than I think we anticipated at the outset, just in terms of total person hours working on it. But because it came with a kit with instructions, it really at no point did it become the kind of thing that only could be done by a professional construction team or whatever. And I think that we could have done it even without an experienced helping hand. It just would have been a little bit harder to figure out a few of the steps. While I'm talking about that, I should also say I've called and emailed the company that sold it to us, Farm Tech, a bunch of times. And sometimes it's hard to reach them, but most of the time it's easy. And I could just be like, hey, I think we're missing a part. And they would walk me through everything and be like, oh, this is why you're misinterpreting what this other part is for. So the company was pretty available. I know that I've heard other good things about a bunch of other companies. So I'm not just trying to say this is the only good one, but doing the homework in terms of customer service from the suppliers of the hoop house seems like a really worthwhile use of time.
Awesome. Well, you kind of answered as well. I wanted to see how's it going, and it sounds like we can kind of see how it's going, but also like, is there anything you want to add in that? And then I also the last thing that I'd love to hear from you is, do you have any other like plans or dreams of how you all can improve conservation on your farm that you might want to do in partnership with NRCS?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I told you we don't have plastic on the hoop house yet. Let me see if I can turn my camera around. But we have it mostly planted out in raised beds. Just we plant everything in raised beds because we're in a pretty wet area of the field, and so we've got, I don't know, a couple thousand ranunculus and anemone plants in here, which will bloom So they actually started to bloom because I think it's spring, but they'll really bloom in February. It's been a little bit of a challenge because we haven't, as I said, because it's mostly been my labor working on it, and I have to juggle the responsibilities of running a farm. And I think that's something that people who are running their own agriculture, like urban ag or small farm business, should think about, whether it's worth taking a loan or something to pay somebody else to do it so that you can get it done in a timely fashion while you are doing the standard operation of whatever you're growing is. But so far so good. And as soon as we get the plastic on, we have a model that has very large opening wall doors on the end walls, and also has side walls that go up 6.5 to 7 feet so that we can have it open most of the year. With cut flowers, a lot of the point of it is just to keep excess rain off of the plants and excess rain from damaging the blossoms themselves. So I guess the short version of that is it's going well so far, although we don't have it fully constructed yet. I should say that we, I believe under a section of the NRCS grant that was designed for beginning farmers, we got half of the money to pay for the hoop house ahead of time, and the other half will come when it's completed, which was a huge help, especially during the COVID times for the structure of the business. In terms of other services, when John came out here to look at the property, I guess almost about 2 years ago, he kind of gave us a rundown of what was possible and what other services NRCS can offer. And what ended up happening before we planted anything in the property, NRCS covered the cost of a elevation survey on the property, which the whole property that we lease is about 2.5 acres. A small part of it is kind of permanently wet, and a lot of it is seasonally wet. And so it was incredibly useful to get a pretty small scale detailed map of where the rises and the low points on the property are, and that's informed where we end up building raised beds. As part of that, we also got a plan for a way to reroute the pre-existing ditch that runs through the property in order to maximize drainage. We didn't end up really following that, mainly because there wasn't enough money to make that happen for the business at the time. And so instead we just started building raised beds and planting things. And then, once you've done that, it's harder or it doesn't really make sense to come back in and regrade that same soil. So we've done kind of like a very small version of what was proposed in that by NRCS. But for us, that was another service from NRCS that was incredibly useful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and your time with us. We really appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah. If you have any other questions, I'm just out here planting stuff, so I can be here for another few minutes if you want. Great.
I guess I'll ask, while we have Chris, does anyone have any questions of Chris specifically? Also, I just got to say that climate smart agriculture, when you were like, the ranunculus are blooming, like,
right.
Yep. We're going to need the NRCS.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think if we get one at the end, I'll reach out to you and share the answer. And we'd love to have you keep joining us as long as you can, but we won't.
I'll be on the call, just audio, and I'm going to get back to work, but I can be summoned because I'll have the audio in my ear.
Appreciate you.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
So Eqip, which the high tunnel cost share, the program that Chris just mentioned, and is, like I said, a beloved program in New Orleans. There was an effort around it in 2017 to really expand those high tunnels in New Orleans, and I think NRCS has done an amazing job. And a lot of those high tunnels that you might see throughout the city are NRCS high tunnels. And I will say that when I first heard about them, I was like, we don't need season extension. And over the years have really come to love the program, and actually am trying to get one myself. So they're awesome for climate control and being able to grow in ground, and do some season extension, but also to be able to do integrated pest management and all that good stuff. So the next thing that I want to talk to y'all about is CSP, which helps agricultural producers maintain and improve existing conservation systems. So this is systems level, and then adopt additional conservation activities. So great CSP programs are things like that you can do that a cost share to maybe stop trying to farm on protected swamp land. I know that there has been some success in our urban farming community with some of that. The other thing I really love of CSP is that they do these pollinator strips. You can see at currently at least River Queen Greens has a pollinator strip, as does Sankofa right now, and they have these really wonderful pollinator habitats that they're encouraging for pollinator diversity, and then for increased pollination on the farm. So that's one of those things that but you do need to be implementing new practices. So the NRCS does not, doesn't pay for something that you're already doing. They're trying to incentivize future good behavior and further good behavior. And then most of that is going to be a cost share. So it's not a grant to do this work. It's a cost share of doing this good work. And then additionally, one of the things that I've always found, and if Mr. Boatman wants to clarify this more when he jumps on in a second, is that they're also trying to pay for you to undo things, right? To not continue farming in a place where maybe you shouldn't be farming, to not continue to do a practice that's detrimental to the environment, instead of paying you to not do that thing. It's almost like you can't hold your property up for ransom. You can't say like, well, we're not farming in the swamp, so pay us to not farm in the swamp. You need to be rolling back on practices that might be damaging to water quality, surface water quality, or erodible land. So the next thing that you're going to need to do, you've had your conversation with your NRCS agent. They're going to tell you at the same time you want to start getting your paperwork ready. So we'll do a quick run through of what a lot of that paperwork will look like. And then we're going to hear from Mr. Boatman. I do want to say right now, even though this video is for the future, and will live on in perpetuity, we will be having a farm number event on January 25th. With some of our NRCS agents, with our FSA agents. We're going to be doing the actual paperwork on site, which I'm very excited about. And we want to really demonstrate, the mass of urban farmers and peri-urban farmers. So farmers that are, in the greater New Orleans area, coming out to sign up for those farm numbers and start to access these programs. So we'll be doing that again on January 25th. We'd love you to come get your paperwork done with the agents themselves and be able to ask your real-time questions. And you can just keep an eye on Sprout's Eventbrite, because we'll be publishing that pretty soon. So eligibility is the first thing that you need to be considering, right? That's not a piece of paperwork. This is from NSAC, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. They wrote this out, so I just yoinked it from them instead of rewriting something. So to be eligible for Eqip funding, an applicant has to be the owner or operator of eligible land engaged in agricultural, forestry, or livestock production. So you can engage with NRCS at the beginning of your farm journey, that's fine, but there does have to be an agricultural journey happening on that property. Eligible land includes cropland, rangeland, pasture, non-industrial private forest land, and other farm or ranch lands. So 50% of total Eqip funding is set aside for livestock operations. And this is like as per the Farm Bill. That doesn't necessarily affect the disbursement on an individual level because of the competition for that funding. And I'd love to hear, validation or disagreement on this from Mr. Boatman, but the competition is not that high. You don't need to be thinking that parsed out, but 5% of those funds are set out for beginning farmers, and an additional 5% is for socially disadvantaged farmers. And so just like Chris Gang was saying, You can actually receive that cost share up front in some situations, maybe if you're in the beginning farmer stage, which for the USDA is 10 years or less. So you might not feel like a beginning farmer when you are in fact a beginning farmer. And for those socially disadvantaged farmers, so minority and tribal producers, as well as veteran farmers, can often receive that cost share up front. And that your applications are ranked. So there is a funding pool and it does usually become exhausted. And so those applications are going to be ranked on cost effectiveness of the proposed approach and the anticipated conservation benefits, as well as how comprehensively they address resource concerns in your area, the fulfillment of the goals, like Eqip's actual goals, and improvement of the conservation practices or systems in place on your farm. So the next thing, the biggest thing that you need is you need a relationship with the FSA, which is usually just kind of encompassed by having a farm number, having your documentation and your paperwork in order with the FSA, with the USDA and Nrcs. It's all, kind of the same form that you're going to be using. So if you go into your office, which currently I'm sure is changing again with COVID numbers going up, but this had moved digitally during COVID, then you want to bring identification for yourself as well as your EIN, so your employer identification number, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you want to bring that lease, which we will discuss, or a rental agreement, and they're going to look up your farm parcel and see if you already have a farm number. The form that you'll be filling out for a farm number ultimately is a CCC 901. All of these forms are available online and printable, which I think is really great for a couple reasons. One, you can email them in if the office is closed due to COVID concerns, and two, you can just type this in and print it out and bring it with you if you're going into the office. The next thing that you're going to need is that, as I said, to get your farm number is that lease. So a lease can be a deed, formal lease, or a signed agreement. If you're operating on a part of an already owned tract, like a sublease, you'll need to draw and demonstrate those boundaries. So I just brought my own drawing in that I was assisted with by the USDA, by Mr. Boatman and Mr. Rang in the office. And so you can see I am actually just part of a larger farm. So similarly, like I think this would probably apply to like Pistol and Stamen. They're actually part of an 88-acre farm. So oftentimes things are subdivided on larger tracts of land. And so you'll need to be able to show that tract boundary and where you are, and a lease agreement that nods to that occupation of space. Then you are going to need that EIN. So everyone who is operating at the Crescent City Farmers Market most likely has an EIN. But in case someone doesn't or is getting ready to really start the farm from scratch, you're going to come to irs.gov and you're going to get your EIN number. You should never pay for an EIN number, just like you're never paying for a DUNS number. It's free. If you are not getting it at the IRS's website, you're probably being scammed. But you can just apply now, and we actually have seen people get EIN numbers in 15 minutes. It's not a complicated process as long as you're running a legitimate business that you have been documenting, and this is just that next step in legitimizing this. And you're going to need to do the AD 1026. Again, you can be walked through all of this by your agent once you begin that relationship, but just so you know what you're going to need to be doing coming into this relationship, that's a highly erodible land conservation and wetland conservation certification. It's like a very complicated form. It is actually quite easy. It has to do with whether or not your land is designated as highly erodible land conservation and wetlands conservation land. And so you will probably already know if that applies to you or not. I'm moving a little quick because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for Mr. Boatman. So if I'm talking too fast, please throw it in the chat. The next thing you're going to be filling out is this CCC 941. That's going to be your adjusted gross income certification and consent to disclosure of tax information. So this document, basically the way I explain this to people, especially when they're for FSA programs or RMA stuff, is that this form is mostly saying whether or not you make over or under $900,000 a year. So I jokingly say it's just probably for most people that we're talking to, you're just gonna, check that you make under $900,000 a year and keep moving. But I would love to meet, the millionaire farmer who has to fill out I believe it's like the 942 if you make more. Oh, I'm being ridiculous. I'm going backwards. So then the next thing you're going to be filling out is the CCC 902 I or E. I stands for individual, E is for entity. And I want to quickly pause and point out that if anyone is saying, oh, I've seen these documents before somewhere. If you have filled these documents out, that means that you do have a farm record. You do have these documents on file. You can make sure that they're still valid or they don't need to be refilled out. But if you applied for, say, CFAP, the Coronavirus Farm Assistance Program, then I need to turn these notifications off. Then you have these documents on file already. So if you are a sole member proprietorship on your farm, if you file your taxes and your Schedule F as an individual on your personal income taxes, then you're filling out the 902I. If you're a farm, you are filling out the E. So if you have an LLC that is not a sole member proprietorship, that's a partnership, you're going to be an E, an entity. So I have right here the I believe. Oh, this is the E. And so this is what that looks like. It's just asking for your entity information. This is establishing a record of your business with the USDA. And so it's also explaining who else is a partial owner of your entity, and pretty straightforward document here. And I always encourage folks to read every bit of these documents. Not because you're worried that there's something like, in the fine print, but because oftentimes if you move quickly, you'll get to like section 4, minor members or shareholders, and you'll be like, I don't know what this means. It doesn't apply to me. But oftentimes somewhere right above, it said, if this is not true of you, skip ahead to. So if you get stressed out looking at these documents and being like, I actually don't know the answer to that, oftentimes it's not a question that's being asked to you. So read that fine print. Come on. My apologies. The clicking is getting a little out of control. And then those are gonna be the main documents that you're pulling together in order to start that established relationship with your NRCS office. So without further ado, we're at about 2:45-ish. I'd love to introduce you all to Mr. John Boatman, who is our NRCS agent for Orleans Parish, and hear a little bit about what he would like to share with producers in the area and what the possibilities of relationships and engaging with your NRCS office are. So Mr. Boatman, your audio is good?
Can you hear me?
Sure can. It looks like you're in a beautiful place,
Okay.
Which makes sense for an NRCS agent.
Well, actually, I'm on leave, but I came back to help work with you on this morning because I know it's important, to get information out and such. But yeah, I'm at home. I'm in my backyard, and I had to try to move around to try to keep the sun out of my face or keep it out of the screen so I could see things. So forgive me if I seem like I'm shifting around and such like that. But Margie, you just about said everything. I don't know what else I have left to say, but as far as giving out information on the program stuff, you did an excellent job. You can come work for us, we're giving out outreach for that. But also I've worked with Chris and working with Chris right now with his high tunnel. It was good to see him, and I appreciate the kind words that he had said about the agency and such. But try to make, I don't know how much time I have. What do I have?
You have up to 16 minutes. And I guess I
Okay.
would like to ask, are you just in Orleans Parish or do you serve other parishes?
Let me, I'll start right there. Right now, I'm working, my office is in Luling, and I serve 6 parishes, St. John, St. Charles, Jefferson, Orleans, St. Bernard, and Plaquemine. I do work as part of the land resource unit area, which includes Thibodeau and Donaldsonville. So sometimes I'm called upon, to assist in those other field offices. At the beginning, you showed something for St. Tammany and it had my name on there. That's incorrect. I had worked there. I was filling in for somebody while there was a vacancy, and so somehow my name still appears up there. And I get calls all the time from people trying to seek assistance up on the North Shore. And unfortunately, I just refer it to the people up there. Those positions have been filled, and I've tried to get our agency to correct that, and they haven't done it yet. And I see they still show me working up there, which is great. St. Tammany is where I live, so that's where I'm talking to you from right now. But I just try to make some notes, since I just have the 15 minutes and so like that, to try to, talk about some of the things that you and Chris had mentioned, maybe to try to clarify some things. And I'll be glad to answer any questions at the end. You mentioned about Eqip program. Eqip is mostly, like you say, conservation practices, and the conservation stewardship program is something that's done on a whole farm basis. I know we're speaking to a lot of small farmers, so that's not a real big thing. But like I say, a sugarcane operation, it might include all the farmland, the farmstead, and any kind of associated land that goes with it, which would be like ditches or turn rows or odd areas of the field. So CSP is a little more intense, or quite really, actually a lot more intense than Eqip. Eqip can be one practice, 1 year. CSP is 5-year term, and to qualify for it, you have to meet or exceed one of the resource concerns. We do an assessment on the property, on what is being done on the land as far as conservation activities. And at the end of the 5-year period, you have to at least meet or exceed one additional resource concern. Those resource concerns deal with soil, water, air, plants, animals, and energy. High tunnels. As Chris had mentioned something about high tunnels, trying to find somebody to help construct. I know sometimes the instructions that you get from these kits, because if you want a high tunnel, it's got to come from a manufacturer. The kit, sometimes the instructions are not very clear. I realized that there was one company in the state that sent a crew out, at a cost, at an additional cost, to construct the high tunnels, but they're not doing that anymore. I don't know if it had to do with COVID or just the expense on their part of sending people all throughout the state. So unfortunately, we don't have that to offer anymore. But there are some people in the city that are pretty familiar with constructing high tunnels, and what information we have, we'd be glad to pass that along to others, since we don't have that available anymore. Registering with Farm Service Agency, there's a lot of paperwork involved. That's for the first time applicant, and don't let it intimidate you. We can help walk you through the paperwork, and FSA can do the same thing. So I mean, they're more than willing to help work, and especially in people in urban areas that they realize that they haven't had any participation with USDA in the past. Everything is new to them, so they can provide some great assistance in assisting with that. All of our applicants that we have through Eqip or CSP will send out an eligibility requirement letter to the applicant that states just what things are needed, what paperwork are needed. What you had mentioned, some of the ones that you had mentioned in the past. The only other thing I would sort of add to that, the adjusted gross income form, that CCC 941. Not only you're checking off whether you make a certain amount of money over a 3-year period or not, that's also that information is disclosed to the IRS. If you receive a payment it will be reported to the IRS and they will send out a 1099. So we need to make sure that all the information that's on that form is correct, including the address. Also, direct deposit, all our payments are made through direct deposit. So we would have to get that information from the applicant on the routing number of the bank or institution and the account number. All this is private information. We keep it all locked up. It's not shared. It's not, out open for anybody to view. So don't worry about that. Offering service, Chris had mentioned something about they had a drainage problem out there, and that's some of the things we do. We don't just do financial assistance, we give technical assistance out. So if somebody has a problem, with drainage, or they have a weed infestation, or they have invasive species on it, anything like that, anything to do with natural resources, we offer assistance, technical assistance, and there's no charge for any of those services. And we can also help with the development of a conservation plan to help solve your resource problems. And again, there's no charge for that. Advanced payments. Any producer who is historically underserved or a beginning farmer is eligible for the advanced payment. And that is a 50% of the cost in the contract for the payment of that practice. They can receive that 50% upfront, because we know, like a high tunnel, they're expensive. A lot of the companies require a down payment. Sometimes it takes them a while before they actually get to get all the material together and send it off. So the thing with advance payment is that the producer has to expend the funds within 90 days of receiving the advance payment. And if for some reason they can't, there's no problem. They just need to return those funds. They're still in compliance with their contract with us, but they would have to return those funds. FSA, our office, the NRCS office, is in our service centers in Luling. Most service centers have an NRCS and an FSA co-located. We unfortunately are not. We're the only office in the state, a region in the state, that we're not co-located. So FSA has an office in Edgard, which is in St. John Parish, but they only are there one day a week if they are there. But they do work out of the same people work out of the Thibodeau office. So that would be the one to get in touch with and speak to those folks there as far as getting your form registered. Let's see.
Can I add just really quickly?
That's about it. I mean, that's pretty quick right there. But if anybody has any questions, and if I can think of something else that we didn't cover already, feel free to ask me questions. Only thing I say is I would like, and I tell everybody this, I mean, we can take applications year round. There are deadlines for certain pools. They'll like Eqip, for instance. We have already passed our first pool deadline for applications. It was back in December. You have to remember, we work on a fiscal year that begins on October 1st and ends on September 30th. So we've already gone through our first pool. We're not going through them, but we have passed that deadline. But we have another deadline for the second pool, and that's approaching sometime in September. Excuse me, I can't remember the exact date. But we take applications year round, and just whenever the next funding pool is available that comes after that, that applicant will be entered into that. And if an application is not funded in that fiscal year, we can defer that over to the following year without having to do a new application.
Amazing.
Okay, I'm ready for any questions.
Yeah, Angelina, you had one.
I just wanted to mention here that registering to have a farm number doesn't just give you access to the programs that have been mentioned in this presentation, but it's a critical part of qualifying for things like crop insurance or disaster relief that your FSA officer might be able to offer to you. And that once you have that relationship with FSA, instead of you always having, you being the small producer, always having to hunt down these opportunities, that will be a person bringing resources to you. So I know that we work with a lot of small producers who don't necessarily have a farm number, but there are a lot of compelling reasons to get one. So just wanted to mention the versatility of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really encourage folks to come out on the 25th so that they're not, it's like going to the DMV or like going to City Hall to file something. Like, you won't have to come back and forth. You can just go and actually like meet your people and get your farm number on January 25th.
Where is that going to be, Margie?
We think preliminarily, we're thinking it's going to be at Press Street Gardens, which is where Sprout's offices are, especially with Omicron, that we want to keep it outside. But yeah. Well, does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Boatman?
I do. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So my question is raw, so excuse the cloudiness as it comes out. But so we farm on a piece of property that's owned by a nonprofit, like a larger farm. And I've been hesitating about establishing a relationship with Nrcs and FSA just because I'm kind of in limbo. Like in the next year, maybe a year and a half, I'll probably be on my own land. And so does it make sense to establish that relationship now, get the farm number, go through the process, or does it make sense to wait until I'm in a more permanent situation?
Mr. Boatman, you're muted.
I apologize. I didn't do that on purpose. I don't know how that happened. I lost. I didn't hear all of the question. I got kicked out for a little while and came back. The farm and track number. I mean, you can register with the Farm Service Agency, and you can put your name, and they put it in a system. They call it SCIMS, and it'll remain there. And if you move on, or you get a farm in another place, you would just have to update the information with them. But once you're in their system, you're in the system. The farm and tract number are particular to that tract of land. So if, say, you have a place in Orleans Parish and you register that, and then you get another place in Mississippi, your name will still be in their system. They'll just add the additional land in Mississippi to your registration. I hope I answered your question.
Yes. And so am I registered? So when I register, I'm registering only for the tract of land that I farm, or for the entire 5-acre farm?
It's whatever you wish to register. If you have to show some type of either ownership or a lease with the landowner in 5 acres or 1 acre or whatever, there's no minimum size. But if you acquire, if that changes, they would have to update the information, or if you acquire additional land, they would just have to fuse that into your with what you have registered now.
Okay.
And Nicole, just because it's like very similar situation on my property, I'll recommend that you might want to work with the nonprofit at the same time for them to get their farm and tract number if they're farming on that piece of land, and then you can show what your pop out is, similar to that slide that I showed you. And you've been to our farm, I know, like where there's part that's Fat River and then there's part that's veggie. So that instead of accidentally registering the entire nonprofit under yourself, you're being able to show that like separation on the same property. It might just be nice to do that all at once.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Thank y'all.
Awesome. I think we're at about time. And Mr. Boatman, I can put it in the chat, or if you would like to tell us what your email is or what the best way for folks to get in touch with you to begin that relationship with their office. Would you share that with us?
Oh, you're muted again. There you go.
Yeah, every time I lose, this is St. Tammany, rural St. Tammany, and we don't get the best connections here. So, but yeah, every time he kicks me out and come back, I'm muted, so I have to unmute. I think you were asking for my contact information.
Mm-hmm.
You were asking about my contact information.
Yeah, if you would like let us know what the best way to contact you is, and you know,
Oh,
whether it's
yeah,
phone or yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can give you both. My phone number is for my office is 985-331-9084. And my email is john.boatman@usda.gov.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and all your work. And we're really, yeah, I hope everyone has a really happy holiday and stay safe and healthy.
Yep. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we will see you at future events. Be well.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Thank y'all.